Hello, everyone. Can you hear me? All right, awesome. Let's see. Okay, chat here. Can you all see my screen? All right, so let's see. Where are we? I think we were introducing Redux. We introduced the general topic of maintaining state. We talked about being able to maintain state at the local level, component level, right? Being able to use the use state hook to declare local variables of different types of variables, Boolean, strings, objects, right? And then sharing that data across multiple components. And then we started looking at an alternative way of doing that, right? So we first looked at local state, and then we started looking at application level state, right? And we very briefly introduced Redux. So today we're going to introduce much more topic of Redux, see how not only can we read data from the Redux, but also update it and modify over time as users interact with our application. Okay. Yeah, so that's the topic today. Later this week, I'll make a Q4 available. I'm doing the Q4 for other sections on Friday. So I want to have all sections to be at the same time, synchronized. So I'm going to wait maybe another day or so before I release Q4 so that everybody takes it at the same time. Well, I mean, not synchronously, right? It'll be available for a couple of days for the online courses. It'll be available for the same thing, right? It'll be available for a couple of days. You can take it anytime you want within those 48 hours. But later in the week. Also, so next week will be our first exam. We are going to do a review on Monday, and then the exam will be available later that week. So if we do the review on Monday, maybe it'll be available on Wednesday evening, or maybe over the weekend or something like that. So that's a plan for next week. Question on the chat says, can you talk about what kind of questions to expect in exam one? So basically exam one is just one big quiz. Right? It'll be very similar to the questions you've gotten in the first few quizzes. Same thing, right? It'll be multiple choice, fill in the blank, acronyms, but it'll be cumulative, right? So you'll have questions from everywhere, some CSS questions, some HTML, some JavaScript, ES6, some React questions, okay? There won't be any Redux. There won't be any Redux questions, but there will be state questions, right? Maintaining state, use state, right? Because we have used use state a little bit before when we introduced React on week 5. But then it becomes apparent how it works, right? We just contrast it with Redux. Question on the chat. Let's see. Will the exam one be available to take throughout the end of next week? Yes. Yeah, exactly. So it'll be available a little longer. So the quizzes are available 2 days. Then the exam will be available, I don't know, 3-4 days. Probably, I don't know, instance, maybe Thursday into Sunday, right? So anytime between those 4 days, you'll be able to take the exam. The exam is long; it's about an hour and a half time, and it's as if you take 3-4 quizzes combined, right, all with different topics, random questions. And same thing, it's an open book, right? So make sure you are familiar with the slides, with previous questions from other quizzes, and a lot of them will be puzzles. In that, I'll say, well, what happens if you click here, click there? What's the output, right? And so you have to step through the code, right, and see what's happening, and there'll be some state questions, right? You click here, there. Also, navigation questions as well. Okay. Yeah. So that's the plan for next week. Any questions? All right. Yeah. So let's keep talking about state management and Redux. So let's review what we looked at earlier this week. We had implemented a couple of examples, right, where we first looked at, for assignment 7, we looked at some component state first, where we looked at being able to work with forms, right, and manipulate individual fields of an object. We looked at dealing with just numbers, right, integers, being able to then share that state across multiple components, right, and notice that so components have sharing the same state, right, and they're all being updated. We saw using Boolean, right, being used to toggle some content here, or being able to edit a field, right? We played around with that. So all this is with component state, meaning the state is within the component and may be shared with the children. Okay, but the state is at the parent, and then the child and the parent needs to communicate, right, to update the state, right? And the way we implemented it is here in the index here. We had in the index, sorry, assignment 7. We worked on 2 examples. One is the component state, right, that declares lots of local state variables, some Boolean variables, right, 2 Boolean variables, a couple strings, right, integers, objects. This could be arrays too, right? They could be array and manipulate the array, like push elements into an array. And then we split up the into multiple components, right? The counter and email, just to illustrate that we could create these separate components, counter components, right, and email components, and then share the state of this component with child components, right? We can pass data, we can pass functions down to the children, and the children can then talk back to us, which is never a good idea, right? That children talk back to their parents. But yeah, the parent, being this component state, share with the child component, it passed it data. It also passed it functions, right? So that the child could notify us, right, if something had to happen. Right? And so we introduced also the object destructor notation, right, to be able to extract and assign, right, object values to a local set of variables. Right? So anyway, so that's what we worked on yesterday. This to talk about the component state. Right? We then took a look at application state, and that was addressing one particular problem. One of the problems in the following this approach, although you could go through life and do everything with this kind of state, right, and be fine. You could build everything using this strategy, right? There's nothing that you cannot do with this strategy. Okay? But the problem is that here, this component now, right? This component has a hard-coded dependency with the surrounding context. Right? This email component, I can't just reuse this component and put it elsewhere. I can't move it, or it has to live inside of this parent component because there's a dependency, right? I need to pass it email, the change email, right? The functions that live here, live in this parent. So we have established a strict relationship between the parent and the child. So that makes the design a little bit hard to modify. Tomorrow I need to move my components around, right? I can't, right? Because they are tied to the hierarchy in which they were defined. So we were looking for a way that these child components could access states, but not necessarily dependent on its parent. Instead, could we create a higher context, right, that would allow us to grab data from this global context, right, without having to be dependent on any parent-child relationship. So that's where we started looking at application state, and the way we did it was here it is. We created 3 components. Notice that the components don't take any arguments. No arguments. That means that it has no dependency whatsoever with the parent component. This application state component is not establishing any context. Well, it's not passing any arguments to any of these, right? So there's nothing that I have that I'm passing you. So you do not depend on me. You can move around these components wherever you want them within this component, right? As long as you can declare some kind of global context from where all the other components can draw from, right? This makes the design much easier to manipulate, to change over time, right? And I can move components around, right, without breaking any dependency, because there is no dependency, right? The only dependency is with global state, right, with this provider at the high level. Okay. And so the architecture is that we create some functions, this function, these function, some function here, that are going to feed data into a store, right? They're going to dump their data into a bucket, and then that bucket, right, is then going to be provided to the rest of the component, where each component can then feel free to pull the data that they want, right? The specific data that they want, without depending on its parent. So notice that my parent is not passing me anything here, right? I am magically extracting data from this data bucket somehow, right? Using this selector. The selector allows me to, the selector gets fed the bucket, the data bucket, and then I can pick out any portions that I want from that data bucket that are relevant to me. Okay, and the building screen does the same thing, right? It just grabs whatever piece of the information in the data bucket that it wants, and kind of like its own little slice of data, and then for render. We did it here in and the implementation was pretty simple. It was just some data, and it was some function that we never explored this any further, right? But right now it's always returning the same data. But this could become much more complex with that it could listen for actions on whether I want to modify my first name, I want to add some preferences, right? I can modify this object. I can change it. I can change the state. We haven't looked at that. We haven't done that. How to change the state, right? We only saw how to read from it, right, by creating a store, right, this data bucket, using a combined reducers that took all the functions that generated data, right, and created a map of how I could retrieve the different slices of data, right, that I want the user or what the tweets. Right? And then that combination was then fed into create store, and the store is the overall bucket, right, the entire data bucket, and then fed to the rest of the component application, right? Okay. So anyway, so that's what we talked about. So today we're gonna continue a little bit, right? So let's take a look at this tweets reducer. So here's my the data bucket for tweets. Okay, that has 4 tweets, and so this is an array. So it's giving me the data slice here is a list of tweets, whereas the user is kind of keeping track of who's currently logged in, perhaps. Yes. And so, and then that data is then fed into the into a reducer, right? And then given the namespace tweets, which can then be retrieved from my tweets component, right? That can read those tweets. So that this tweet matches this tweet here. You can retrieve that slice of data, copy it in a local variable, and then use to render these tweets, right? Which is what renders these 4 tweets here. Okay. So anyway, yeah. So let's see what else. Okay, so one of the things that I did mention Monday, right, was that if you realize this, that that create store has a slash through it. See that? It has a slash because it's being deprecated, right? React.js doesn't want us to use that anymore. That we should instead use a newer strategy, which is what we're going to be talking about today. Let's see, it's a question on the chat. Just wondering, what will be discussed in exam review lecture next week? Yeah, so what we're going to do is that we're going to go through several questions that are representative of past midterm exams, and we're going to solve them together, right? And it's going to be a chance for you to ask me any questions about the exam. We'll solve some past exams together, so you'll have a better idea of what is that what to expect for the midterm exam. All right, so yeah, so React.js doesn't want us to use. I'm sorry, Redux. The Redux team doesn't want us to use the create store function anymore. And in reality, it was kind of a pain to use Redux. It has a very steep learning curve. So already it's it's kind of funky that you're defining the data outside of the component, right? And then magically somehow you're providing this data bucket to the components, and then somehow magically your components are retrieving the data. So it's kind of funky, right? That we are passing data somehow without passing it through functions, right? And so already that might be somewhat challenging. Okay. But in addition to that, there was a lot of design patterns and best practices on how to use Redux, and it was unnecessarily complex. Right? You had to create a whole bunch of reducers and put them in a separate file, then a whole bunch of actions, put them in a different file. All sorts of constants. So you ended up with a lot of artifacts to deal with, right, and maintain. And so the new API, the new Redux API it's a much more terse, right? It's much more compact. You can do a lot more with less. All right. So that's what I'm going to introduce. I'm not going to cover the legacy topic, right? I only covered create store only because that is legacy. But you're still going to find quite a bit of it out there in the Stack Overflow, and, documentation. But it's being phased out, so I'm not going to waste more time than this. Right? I'm just going to show you, right, how to convert this into the new and improved toolkit. The new technique is called the Redux toolkit. Okay, so yeah, let's do that. So first of all, the assignment does walk you through using this new technique, this approach. So at the top, it walks you through, installing Redux, installing React Redux. That's still the same, right? We did this already in the last assignment, in the last lecture. But additionally, now we have to install the toolkit, the Redux.js toolkit, right? So let's do that. So in the terminal, let's see, let's install this. Let's paste that. That's to install the Redux toolkit. Okay. So once we have that, we can do the following. We're going to change a few things. Okay, so here in the reducers, okay, all these reducers, the tweak reducers, the current user reducer, we're going to do the following. Okay. So we're going to have the same data. It's going to be the same. But instead of creating this reducer function, we're going to do the following. I'm going to do const with our tweets slice. We create a slice. Okay. So it used to be that to create these functions that maintain the data, that manipulated the data, that initialized the data, they were implemented in a whole bunch of different places, right? So what the new API allows you to define everything in one single place, and it's much easier to maintain. Okay, and so they called it a slice, meaning with the intention that you're going to have a lot, the whole data bucket that the application needs is going to consist of many multiple slices of data that are relevant to different parts of the application. Right, so one slice might be of the currently logged in user, right? Another slice might be, the shopping cart for that user. Another one might be preferences. Another one might be all different pieces of data that are relevant across the application, but it allows you to break it out, right, into its own sub-context, right? Which here we refer to as a slice. And then each slice can have its own isolated data set, right, from other slices, right, that you can treat as a single data silo, right? And you can do all the CRUD operations. You can create, read, update, delete data within that slice of data. Okay. So here, this tweet slice is maintaining the data that is relevant to tweets. Okay. Okay. So a tweet slice has at least two properties. So it's an object now, right? And that can maintain at least the name of the slice, which are called tweets, and then the initialization of what is the initial state of the data in that slice, right? What do you want to put in that slice initially? So you can initialize and say initial state is this array of tweets that is listed here. Okay. And then we're not going to export the reducers. So I'm gonna abandon this. Not do that anymore. Instead, we're going to export the default. The tweets reducer slice has a set of reducers that are going to allow us to manipulate the content. We're going to say export default reducers. Okay. And this is well documented here in the assignment on how to do this. Right? When it gets to I think it asks you to create a little create a little to-do editor where you can create to-dos, remove to-dos, and whatnot. Right? And so it's documented here on how to follow. So you can follow the instructions. Okay. So up to this point, you'll notice that this works the same, right? Nothing has changed. The new API is backwards compatible with whatever you were doing before, right? So it is compatible. This is still compatible with combined reducers, right? Still compatible with combined reducers, with a create store. It works just the same way, okay? All right. So now that we have those slices, let's now replace this old implementation. We're going to comment that out. So that's going to break our application. Now it's dead in the water. It's fine. We're going to create the store in a different way. We'll say create the store. And instead of using the old create store function, we're going to use the new function, which is called a configure store, right? Configure store, and it's part of the new Toolkit library. Okay, so configure store kind of combines these two things together, right? It's going to first combine reducers, and then it's going to create the store, both things, all in one, instead of breaking it out into multiple calls, right? So this now takes an object where you can specify what are the reducers. Say the reducer, and again, this is well documented here how to use combine, configure store, right? And you can specify what is the meta or the master reducer. So reducer allows you to specify what is the combination of all reducers. Right? It allows you to specify the same object that you use here. That's the same object you would provide here, right? Which it takes that to combine and create a master reducer, which then passes it on to the configure store. So basically, is doing these two things combined into one. Okay. And here would be the same thing. We have the current user, same thing, right? Current reducer, and then tweets. Same thing. If you go back, right, this should still work just the same way. Okay. So minimal changes to go from the old to the new, right? But right, it introduces a lot of new stuff that is so much easier to write code from before. Okay, and you won't know how great it is unless you've done the old Redux, right? The old Redux was, very heavy, doing this and that and the other, just way too many things just to do some small things. So now you can do a lot more with less. Okay. All right. Yeah. So what can we do? What can we do? Let's see. Well, okay. So we know that the tweet reducer, right, is contains these tweets. I'm going to just remove this. You have these tweets, right? I just want to make sure that's tweet 124, right? If I change this, notice that we have live, right? These are the tweets. So let's talk about being able to not only read data. Here we are reading data, right? We are able to retrieve the data from the from tweets, right, by getting state.tweets. But say I want to be able to manipulate the content, not only read the data, right, and then just render it. I like to maybe create new tweets. Maybe I want to be able to delete tweets. I want to be able to maybe modify a tweet. Okay, let's see. Is there a question in the chat? Does hooks and context API achieve the same objective? Yes, context API is React.js implementation of kind of like reducers, right? And Redux, it's its own state management. And yes, we will cover context API as well. Redux is still widely used in the industry. It's still by far the leading state management library. React.js didn't have its own state management mechanism. Now React.js has introduced its own context API. And yes, context API is the equivalent of Redux. Yeah, right now, the Redux is still widely available and used, and it's very, very common that you'll get it in an interview or whatnot. But we will cover context API as well. Yep. And we'll do some contrast and comparison of how this works. Okay. Okay, so say we want to let's see, create a new tweet, right? Let's see. No, actually, no. Let's do something easier. Let's we want to be able to delete an existing tweet, right? So, for instance, if Elon gets a hold of Twitter, maybe we'll be able to modify a tweet or edit a tweet. So let's add a few things that might be coming to Twitter soon. So let's say we have here a button that allows us to delete the tweet. Okay, so here's a delete, and maybe let's dress it up a little bit. Class name, and this might be button danger, red, and maybe let's float it to the right, to the end. This way at the end, and like you'll click on it and then delete that tweet. Okay. So let's see. So what we can do is maybe have an event handler that listens for clicks on this button, right, and calls a function here that something like that const delete tweet. Okay. And here, right, we can do an on click event handler. We can say on click, we call the delete. Right? And here we can say we can print out alert delete. So now if I click on it, notice that it alerts that yeah, it's handling that event. Very good. But we need to be able to know which tweet are we deleting, right? So we would want to maybe pass as an argument, the tweet that I'm removing. Now, careful here, right? If you put a parenthesis here, this is going to go into an endless loop. Careful there, because that would be an immediate invocation of the function, which would cause the component to re-render, which calls the function again, which causes to re-render. So you'll be stuck in an infinite loop. Very careful. So if you're not passing any arguments, then this is fine, right? It's this will be invoked later when the onClick gets invoked, right? But if you put a call there, it'll be invoked infinitely. So careful, right? If you're going to pass an argument, you need to wrap this inside of a function. Okay, and then here we can pass maybe the actual tweet, right? And the tweet, I can print out tweet. And see the tweet here, and we can say the tweet dot tweet, right? Yeah, we're gonna post this, right? So, so if I run that, if I delete, it says, okay, I'm deleting tweet 1, 2, 3, 4. I'm deleting tweet 2, right? Deleting tweet 4, which is pretty cool, right? That that each button, right, in the LI kind of remembers what object was used to originally render that line item, right? So it kind of remembers that. It's pretty cool after rendering. So what we're gonna do, basically, we want to be able to tell, or notify somehow. We want to notify the tweets reducer that this data structure needs to be modified, right? That if I am removing the second tweet, that this should be removed, and somehow the whole thing should re-render. Okay, so how do we do that? We need to notify this guy. We need to notify this reducer that's to somehow modify this data structure. Okay, so how do we do that? Well, the way we do that is as follows. Okay, so the we need to declare in the reducer, okay, we need to declare what are going to be the functions that are going to manipulate the data structure, right? And those are going to be the reducers. The reducers are going to modify or transform actions and the current state of the application, right? And it's going to compute a new state. Okay. So here we're going to declare reducers, and this is going to be all the different things that we want to be able to do to this data structure. We want to be able to add to-dos, as a function. Okay. We want to we want to be able to delete to-do. Okay. We want to be able to update to-do. All right. What else? We want to maybe no, not to-do. I'm sorry, tweets. Add a tweet. Sorry, add a tweet. Delete a tweet, or update a tweet. Maybe I want to like a tweet. Right? I want to maybe unlike a tweet. All the things that you want to be able to do a tweet. You want to reply a tweet. Right? I want to retweet a tweet. Okay, so each one of these functions manipulates this data structure. Okay, so let's focus on this one, delete a tweet. Okay. I want to be able to, from here, when I click this delete tweet, I have the tweet that I want to remove, and somehow I need to pass it to this function here, right? Then I'm going to pass it the tweet that I want to remove, and in here it'll do what it'll need to do. Okay, so how do we do that? Well, what we're going to do is that we're going to export all these functions so that they will be accessible here, so I can call them. Right. So we're going to export on a map, right? That is going to send out from the slice all the actions. These, right, are going to be the actions, the various actions, and I want to send out all of these, like each tweet, add tweet, all of them, update tweet, like tweet, unlike tweet. All these guys are now going to be accessible to anybody who imports these actions, right? So for instance, I'm going to call now. I want to be able to invoke this. How do I invoke it? I can import it. I can import the leads tweet. There it is from the tweets producer. Yeah. And I want to be able to call it. Unfortunately, it's not as simple as just saying delete tweet like that. Okay, not quite. Well, actually, let's see what happens here. Right. So here's we have the alert. Let's remove the alert and call the tweet directly. All right, passive tweet. Okay, so let's do an alert here. Okay, so let's remove it. Let's do a delete. Notice that it's not working, not quite. Okay, it's not quite working. Right, almost. Okay, so what we need to do, an additional step, unfortunately, is not as trivial as that. The tie between these two is going to be similar to this magical use selector. Right, use selector magically pulls down data, right, from the reducer, right, from this data bucket, the store. Right, and we need to do something similar to communicate with that store. Right, we need to dispatch these actions, right, to the store. So how do we do that? So the way it's done is as follows. Right? Just like there is a use selector to be able to read data from the reducer, there is a hook that allows us to dispatch events back to the store. Okay, so to do that, we're going to grab a dispatcher, right, from using the use dispatch. Okay, I'm going to store it in a local object called dispatch. It's a function. This returns a function that allows me to now send events. Which events? Or which actions? These actions. Right, so I'm going to say dispatch like that. Let's just have to wrap it inside of dispatch. All right, so almost, not quite. We're almost there. Almost there. So now if I say delete, notice that the alert comes up. So it is being called, right? That function is being called, but it's coming back with undefined. Something is wrong there. Right? This tweet that I'm passing is not quite what this guy's expecting. Not quite. Right? It turns out that all these functions, you can't just pass anything you want. Right? You have to pass certain things. Right? You have to pass two things. You have to pass the state. You have to pass the action object. Right? So this state is the current data in your slice. Yeah, it allows you to look at your current world in your current little corner of the data bucket, right? Your slice. This is your current slice. What is your data set right now? And the action corresponds to the context or the verb, right? So this is the noun, the data, and this is the verb, the action that you want to take on that data. What do you want to do to it? Including some events and also any data that was generated through that event. Right? For instance, we can pass data. This tweet would be embedded instead of the action. We can pass this tweet as part of its payload. Okay, and so the tweet actually is inside of the action that payload. The payload is whatever I pass. So this payload is this tweet that I'm passing. See that? This tweet gets embedded inside of the actions payload. That payload is this tweet, which includes the text, the tweet. Okay, so now it works. See that? Tweet 1, 2, 3, 4. Right, and then this one, tweet 3. Whatnot. See that? Okay. All right, so we can pass data. We can pass data. Now the state allows us to say, well, where are you right now? What is it? What is the state? Well, state is basically the current state. It hasn't changed. Right? It's still those four tweets. Right? So this allows you to calculate the next state based on the old state and an action. This allows you to say, okay, given that we have 4 tweets and you want to delete a tweet, and I know which one you want to remove, I can calculate a new state that does not have the tweet that you want to remove. So I can calculate the next state. Make sense? Okay. So for instance, I can say, given that tweet, I can find where that tweet is in that array. I can say, where is that tweet? I can say tweet index. Where is it? So if I go through the state is the current state, which is initially is this array. I can find the index, right, of the by going through all the tweets, going through each one of the tweets, and if the tweet ID matches the action dot payload dot ID, if it matches, it'll tell me what index. Where is it in that array? Right. So if the ID is 2, 3, 4, and this is 1, 2, 3, well, that's not it. Okay? But if I find that it's 2, 3, 4, and 2, 3, 4, I find it. That's the index number 0 or 1 or 2 or 3. It'll tell me what index is it in. And once I know where it is in the array, I can splice it out. I can say, well, I'll take the old state, right, and splice out at location tweet index, splice out that one element. Okay, just remove it. So now if I go here, right, I can remove tweets, and they're gone. Make sense? And because the state changed, the components will be notified through the selector of the new list of tweets, right? And it will force the component to re-render this new array that's missing a couple of tweets. That makes sense? Everybody still with me? Okay. Obviously, if I refresh, everything goes away back to where we were, right? Okay. All right, so let's keep playing around with this idea. Say I want to create a new tweet. For instance, I have here maybe a new line item where I have a list group. Can you hear me? Uh-oh. Hello, can you hear me? Oh, I heard a bleep on the. I thought maybe I lost you. Let's create a line item. Notice that this line item is outside of the array of the iteration, so it's going to be always there, right? So let's create a button here. And this says tweet. This is a class. This is a button. Primary. there's my tweet here, and maybe put round it. There we go, right? And let's put it to the there it's tweet. Okay. Yeah. So if I tweet, maybe I want to call a new function that says const, add tweet in. Okay. And let's say blue tweet, and I'm going to be able to call it my button on click add tweet. Add tweet. Wait, what? Well, add tweet. Add tweet in. So if I tweet, right, it works. New tweet. Okay, so what do we want to do? We want to call the add tweet in the reducer. We want to dispatch. We can say dispatch add tweet function like that. And then in the add tweet here, we can say alert. Well, let's see. Click on it. Was that it is calling new tweet? Perfect. Excellent. So we could perhaps just add a new random tweet. We can say state.push, a brand new tweet that has to have a unique identifier, right? So this this could be a new date, get time, and then the actual tweet will be a new tweet. Okay. Followed by the state. Okay. Oh, oops, state. Oh, okay. This is state action. So all these functions take the same argument. State action, state action. And basically what we're building here really is a finite state machine, right? We're building a finite state machine where you have all the various states that I can be, right? And the actions are the edges of the state machine. And what the actions do is transition from one state where you were into another state. Right? So this logic is basically implementing a finite state machine. Let's see a question in the chat. If required, can we pass 2 or more arguments? Well, absolutely. Well, I mean, in the action, you can pass whatever you want. The payload can be anything you want. So you can only pass 2 arguments here, but the payload itself could be an object, an array, it could be anything you want. Right, so yeah, you can pass any fairly complex data structures in the payload. Okay. All right, so let's see. So let's try this out. And tweet. There it is, right? Tweet 4. I keep tweeting the tweets. See that being added to the bottom. All right. How does it go away? So yeah. Or instead of this hard coding this, perhaps I could pass a piece of text, as an argument. Right, so for instance, instead of being hard coded there, from here I could pass in some data. Add tweet, maybe it's going to be new tweet. Okay, so that is going to be available where? In the payload. In the payload, right? It's a question on the chat. Is mastering state managing the last frontier of React developer, or are there more concepts for into being a good front-end developer that we are not going to be taught? As concerns, the next topic seems to be Node.js. So yeah, no, we're gonna keep doing React.js. We are gonna keep doing React.js, but obviously looking at now talking asynchronously to a data source, right? right now, all this data is being maintained synchronously inside of the browser. So the next couple of things would be, how do you integrate this with other services that are on the as a RESTful service, and now that communication is asynchronous, right? And it means that I'm going to send a request, right? When it comes back, that's going to be an asynchronous communication. How do you synchronize the two? So that's going to be a big topic. Also, one topic that we do not cover here, but is covered in software engineering, again with React and Node.js, is caching and performance. Right? Because you're talking to remote resources, it could get pretty expensive talking to these services, right? So you want to be able to cache as much as you can these requests, that if you know that you want to go fetch something, a remote request, you want to cache that response in the client without having to bother going out to the server. So there's quite a bit to go. Also, there's I used to cover this, but it was a little bit too much, I think. You can use exactly what we're doing right now here and using React.js and implement desktop applications, mobile applications that using React Native instead of React.js, React Native, and these would be cross-platform, right? You can make applications that run both on iOS and Android, right? All within staying within React. Right? So it's a very broad set of topics. I think it was a little bit too fringe to be covered here in a web development course, but certainly is a exciting thing that you should be exploring. You'll have the core skills, right, to then go on and explore React Native on your own. Yeah. Okay. But yeah, if you have those kinds of questions, we can take that offline. Yeah, so I'm passing this new tweet as part of the payload. So here we can, instead of hard coding this, we can retrieve that from the payload. We can say action of payload, right? So now this will be always new tweet, right? Same information that I'm passing along here in payload, right? Or instead of doing this, we might want to have an input field where we can type what we want to add, right? So this could be an input field here, inputs, right? And this could have the value, right? This could be the tweet, and then instead of having this hard coded, maybe this could be a local state variable. So notice that now it's a mixture of local state for you to maintain the input field here, and then sending it to the application state, right? Right. So there's some communication going back and forth from my local state variable to a global state variable, right? So we can here declare a local state variable. We can say const tweet string, and this could be a state, right, that has the initial string, so a new tweet, and this input field, right, would have its value as the tweet string, this. Okay. And as you type, we can do on change event set tweet string. Oh, sorry, this is destructor. So this is set tweet string, and we can set it here. Set tweet string to e.target. So this is what we covered on Monday, right? Dot value. And then here, instead of being this hard-coded, we can pass the tweet string. There we go. So now we can refresh this, and the tweet is you know, Tesla delivers record vehicles. And the tweet, and there it is, right? And it adds as a tweet. Then it says Tesla stock funds. And so I can now tweet those. Everybody okay? Make sense? All right, so those are examples of retrieving data, adding data. How about modifying data? Modifying data that already exists, right? That's already there. Okay. So for instance, we might want to keep track of the fact that some tweets are liked, some are not. So this could be whether it's liked. So this might be true. Some false. So false. False. Okay. And maybe also keep track of how many likes do I have? How many likes? We have this many likes. This have that many likes. That many and that many likes. Okay. Oops. And here we could maybe render that somehow. Maybe here in this LI, we could say we could have a button that that allows you to that if you like it, it renders as red. If you don't like it, it renders blue or something. Right. So we could say here a button that you can say like. Right, and this is class button, and then a button here that might render liked but in red. So class name like button danger. And so let's push them all to the right. And so maybe this would be a float and all these. Okay. So if it's already liked, then it'll show red, right? And if it's not liked, it'll let you click on like, right? So for instance, if it's already liked, then this one renders, the one at the bottom. And so you say tweet dot liked, then this renders. Okay, and the inverse is true. If it's not liked, so if it's not tweet dot liked, then it renders this one. So either renders one or the other. There. So notice that this one has not been liked, whereas this has been liked. Okay, so if I want to like it, I click on the like, right, and then it would switch it to liked. Make sense? Maybe put some space in between these two. So this delete, maybe some margin at the beginning. Oh, not. I'm sorry, beginning. Start. There we go. So still a little bit. There we go. Okay, so how do we do that? How do we change that? So we want to. If we click on this, it's going to invoke the I want to like it. But if I click on this, it's going to unlike it, right? So let's do that. Let's have two event handlers. One is like tweet handler. and I'll pass in the tweet that we're liking and the cons unlike tweet. And so this one, if it's already liked, right? If I click on it, it means that I want to unlike it, right? So this is unlike. No, look, it's gonna call unlike. I'll pass in the tweet. And the same, the inverse is true for the other one, right? If it's not liked, and I click on it, and then I want to call the like tweet handler, and we'll pass in the tweet. Make sense? So yeah, so then I can call or dispatch the like tweet in the reducer. I'm going to pass the tweet that I like. And similar here, I want to dispatch the unlike tweet in the reducer. I'll pass the tweet that I am unliking. Make sense? Right. So now we can head over to the reducer and actually implement these. So then here's the like and unlike. Right. They all take the same state in the action and state in the action. All right, so how would this work? Let's see. So like tweet. If I like it, that means that I need to find the tweet, and I have to modify that tweet at that location, right? So let's find the tweet, which I already know how to do that, right? I can do const tweet index, find the tweet. Notice that I am finding the payload is the tweet that I'm passing, and the state is the current array of tweets. So I want to say that state sub tweet index. I want to. What do I want to do? I want to change what? I want to change what? I want to change the liked to true. Yes? Right? And I want to increment the count of likes. This is likes plus 1. Correct? All right, let's see if this works. Let's see, let's click on like. There it is, right? We've got likes. I guess we should like it. What about the others? So none of the others work, right? Because they're not working. So let's see if we can render how many likes it has, right? So that we know what it's working or not. So for instance, in the button, perhaps, right, it could show how many likes it has. So this could be tweet likes in both cases, right? Both cases, whether I'm liking it or not, right? It's always going to display how many likes it has. Okay, there it is. Right? So let's refresh. So this has 2345. If I click on it, notice that it goes to 2346 and 2368. See that? So it looks like it's working. And the unlike is kind of like the inverse, right? I'm going to find the tweet. And so like will be false. And I'm going to subtract 1. And so let's refresh. So this is 45, and I click on it, it becomes 46. If I click again, it becomes 45, right? This becomes 64. This becomes 33. See that? So it looks like it's working. There we go. See that? Okay. How about being able to edit the tweet? How's that? Let's do that. I want to update the tweet. Okay, so this is state action. So let's see. So this be nice to have it either as a text like this or a text area. That'd be cool. Right. So for instance, this tweet, it could either render as just a text, just like that, right? Let's put this in spam. So that's better manipulate it like that, or it could be a text area, right? So it could be this text area, right? The value is the tweet.tweet. Okay, so it's my text area, and I only edit it if I have like an edit button, right? Which Twitter doesn't give us. Well, let's do that. Let's change the state of the tweet, and we'll see whether we're editing or not editing. Right now, the question is, where do we store that? Where do we store that state on whether we're editing the tweet or not? We need to be able to have like a toggle here that I am editing and then I'm done. But where do I maintain that information? It could be that each tweet has its own editing variable. You can do that, right? Each tweet knows whether they're being edited. Or there could be a global variable that allows me to, only edit that once tweet. Okay, so how can we do this? All right, so what we could do is keep track of the once tweet being edited. I'm only editing that once tweet. Okay, so let's do that. Let's have like an edit button, okay, that says button edit, and maybe this could be button green, not green, success, like money, and I'm going to float to the end, something like that, right? And maybe this could have a two like that, right? And so if we click on the edit button, then this would appear, right? But if we can only edit maybe one at a time. But if I click on edit, then this gets edited. Click on this, then this gets edited, right? But not anyone else. So let's see. So we need to keep track of who's being edited. So for instance, we could maintain here, say const tweet being edited, right? State variable, tweet being edited, and set tweet being edited, right? Let's put this here at the top. And it's going to be used state. At first, it's going to be null, right? It's not pointing to anyone. No tweet is being edited. No tweet is being edited. So what we do here is, when we click on edit, when we click on the edit button, we can store the tweet that is being edited. I would say on click, say set tweet being edited, this tweet. So now we know the tweet that's being edited, right? And then what we could do here is that we only show the text area. We only show the text area if this is the tweet being edited. I can say, if this tweet is equal to tweet being edited, right, then we show the text area. Right. So for instance, if I click on this edit, there it is. We're editing that one or this one. There's only one of them is being edited. Right? Only one of them. Okay. One cool thing that we could do is that if we're editing this, there's no point in showing the current value, right? It's already in the text area, right? So we could say that, right, if the tweet is not, right, the tweet being edited, then we just show the same. Okay, so there it is. We can either click here, that, see that? Make sense? We could also, the edit button. There should be a way to just stop editing. Like saying, okay, I'm done editing. Maybe we could have a button here where it says done or save or whatever, right? So let's add another button. Let's add another button that says done, maybe. Class name. And we're done. So this is class name. This is button, primary maybe, right? And then float ends well and ms2. So here's done. And this should be mutually exclusive, right? If you're editing, then edit should not show, it should only show done. It should show both at the same time, right? So we could toggle. We could say, actually, before we do that, if we click done, then say, const. We can handle it. We could say, if I click on this, we could say, on click. We could set the tweet being edited to null. Right, so we don't know now who's being edited. Right, so for instance, we could say done. See, that's what this toggles it to being edited and done. Edit and done. See that? So these buttons should be kind of like mutually exclusive. They shouldn't both be displayed at the same time, right? And maybe instead of a text area, it might look better if this were an input field. That maybe that looks a little neater. See, edit. Yeah, that looks better. Right? So this could be mutually exclusive. We could say that this button of editing should be shown if I'm not already editing this tweet. Say that if you are not, if this tweet, right? If this tweet is not the one who's being edited, tweet being edited. If it's not this, then the edit button should be there. Okay. So for instance, if I click on this one's being edited and it disappears. And when I click on done, it reappears. See that? And same thing, and the inverse is true for the done button, right? So if this tweet is indeed the one that's being edited, right, then it's when I show the button. Otherwise, I don't show the done button. All right, so now they kind of like toggle each other, right? So that if I click on edit, I have the done, right? And then I show one or the other. See that? So edit, and then I can type in and then say done. Everybody good? Are you still with me? All right. Okay. Yeah. So what do we do with this text area? What do we do with this text area? As we type, what should we do? As we type. Well, what we could do is modify that element, right? That data lives here. It's this tweet.tweet. As you change, right, on change, I want to be able to modify, right, that tweet. And so let's create here an event handler that says const update tweet handler. And here's a tweet. Okay. That I'm editing, and so this says it's going to call that update tweet handler. I'm going to pass in the tweet that I am modifying. Okay. So what do we do here? Well, we could do what? We could say, well, I'm going to dispatch to the update tweet in the reducer. I'm going to pass in the tweet. Okay, the tweet that I am changing, and I'm also passing you the what am I passing? What am I passing? Okay, so the problem is that what? Nowhere are we storing this value, right? Nowhere am I storing that value. Unchange. Oh, okay, so the events, right? We're passing unchange. We have to pass the events, right? And the actual value. And I'll pass the event dot. So the text, the actual text that it wants to be, it's in here. Target value, the actual value that it wants to be. Okay. So this can say what? You can say I'm going to pass you a brand new tweet. A brand new tweet. I'm going to pass you an object that contains the old tweet. Right? But the text of the tweet, right, is going to be equal to the new tweet text. Okay. So I'm passing you an object that looks exactly like before, but I am overriding the text. Right? So now back in the reducer, in the tweet, basically we just have to replace that tweet with the new version of the tweet. We have to find where the old tweet was, and we need to replace the tweet at that location with the new and improved tweet that is in the payload. Yes. Okay. All right. Let's see if this works. Let's see if this blows up. Okay. So let's refresh. So let's edit. Let's see if this blows up. Oops. Let's edit. Okay, it's sort of working. It's sort of working. Edit. Let's me type one character at a time. Why is that? Why are you doing that? Blah 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 blah. Let's see value input blah blah blah. Edit it. Edit it. We handle dispatch blah blah blah. Tweet now. Getting errors. Let's see if I'm getting any errors. Bottom. Console. So say you provide value, blah blah blah. Unchange. This is the bundle. Let's say which one labs components. State. Okay, that's something different. Application state. No, none of those. Oh, check the rent. Okay, that's from yesterday. None of those. Okay. So one character at a time. That's interesting. So somehow it's losing the fact that it's being edited. My guess is that this re-renders, this is set to null initially, and so we lose that. What are we doing on changer? Yeah, no, we're passing the data to the reducer, which I did want to point out that there's a better strategy. There's a better strategy that what we should do instead of going to update this, right? Instead of updating it, what we should do instead, okay, is notice that we have buttons here. We have buttons that we know exactly when the editing begins and when the editing is done. Okay, and this is very important when we'll get to the Node.js part of the server. Okay, notice that as we are typing, we are going to the reducer every keystroke, right, and running this update function on the reducer. We're calling this update tweet for every single keystroke, and that's not a good design. And this will become apparent when we tie in the server, right? Because the server needs to be notified that all this data is changing because we need to store it in a database, right? All these updates needs to be permanently stored. And you don't want to have a design where as you type every single keystroke, you are sending every keystroke to the server. That would be very, very expensive, right? Very, very chatty. You are wasting network resources. Instead, right, what we should do instead is that we should cache all those changes, all those cumulative incremental changes locally, right, local state. And then when we're done, grab all those changes and then send that in a single as a single update, as a single state. Right. So let's do that. Let's do that. So when we click on edit, what we'll do is that we will copy over the data that we want to modify. Right. We'll set a local variable, right, that you can change all you want. And then when you click on done, this is without telling the reducer. Now, as we are typing, we're not going to notify the reducer whatsoever. And then when we're done, we're going to take the local state and notify the reducer in a once sweep. Okay, that's a much better design, right? So let's see. Yeah, exactly. Thank you, Jixian. Yeah. Okay. Let's do that. So when we click on editing, editing, set editing, where is it? Set editing. Okay, set editing. Tweet being edited. So we know the tweet that is being edited, right? And so the string, the text here, the text that we are editing here is not going to be the actual tweets. It's going to be a copy of that string. That's going to be a local string, right? So let's do that. We're going to be copying here. We'll need a state variable to maintain that. So const set it. Oh, maybe we could use this. Right? Maybe you could use that. Maybe we could use that. Let's see. Let's see if we could do that. Let's see if we could use this instead. Tweet being edited dot tweet. Okay. And as we update, we change. We're not going to call the dispatch. Right? We're going to say set tweet being edited. We're going to copy over the tweet being edited, and we're going to change the tweet to be the new tweet text. Let's try that first. Let's see. So edit. Now, what is going on? No, it's re-rendering. It's re-rendering, and it's setting this to null. That's what's happening. Tweet, set tweet, and set it to null. No, not set it. Huh. Right. I'm gonna debug this, right, and I'll push it over, so for you to take a look at. Right. So the assignment does walk you through implementing and using this new Redux and the toolkit, right? But to practice it, it asks you to implement first a simple to-do reducer where you can create new to-dos. You create new to-dos. You can type in a to-do, right, and create and delete a to-do. You can type in, right, to do, delete it. You can say that it's done. So checkbox where you can check off that you're done with that to-do. And then for Twitter, it asks you to re-implement the components that you already have for the who to follow list, right? The summary at the bottom, right? All those. Right now, they are using hard-coded JSON files that we used to load those files and then just iterate over them and dynamically render it. So to practice, it asks you to convert that into using Redux. Right? Now, the first couple, the follow list and some of these are all, they're not going to change over time. Right? You're not going to be able, you just want to read the content. So you're not going to be able to create new who, right? Who to follow. So it asks you to just create a very simple Redux slice, and add it to the configure store, right? And then provide it to your Twitter, and then in your who to follow, just read the who, so that you can then iterate and display it, right? Instead of reading the file like you're currently doing. Right? To practice this, you're going to move that JSON file into a reducer, and the reducer you're going to use that as the initial state. We use that as the initial state here. Okay, and then through the once you configure the store, you can pull it down and then render it. So that's going to be fairly trivial, right? That shouldn't take you more than 10 minutes. Right? Then you're going to tackle something that is slightly more difficult, but not really. It's almost the same thing, right? So instead of having the tweets being read and hard-coded in the post summary list, right? Instead, you're going to create, again, a simple reducer that is only for read-only. You're going to combine it, right? You're going to combine it with the other reducer, the who reducer, which from the previous assignment. And then you're going to modify your post summary item or list, sorry, the post summary list. Instead of reading the post from this array, from this JSON file, it's going to read it from the global state. Okay, again, this shouldn't take you more than 10 minutes. Okay, all right. So here's where some of the challenge. So here's where the challenge starts. Okay. So using the post summary list and item as an example, right? You know how to do that already. There's two examples that you've created two different reducers, reading the data, initializing it, and reading from it. Now you're going to create a component that does the same thing with tweets, okay? Which is what we've been playing around with, like tweet, right? A reducer with tweet, which is very much you can follow along with what we've been doing here in class, okay? And you already have a tweets JSON file that we gave you with some tweets. Here, I'm just I'm creating some bogus tweets. You're welcome to modify the array of tweets with topics that you care about, something that is funny to you. But add fields such as liked, likes, reply, retweets, like we did here in class, right? We have the tweet reducer. We added fields, likes. This one you can add likes, replies, the number of replies, the number of retweets. Okay, and I describe what they are. Here's an example of what the tweets JSON file might look like. So anyway, build that so that the Twitter tweets renders like this on the right hand side, right? And notice at the bottom you have a statistics component, right, that renders some icons. Feel free to use your own icons. They don't have to be these icons. Use like the share button, likes, right? How many times have been retweeted? How many? How many times retweeted? How many replies? I think these are replies. Yeah. And then use that component, right, to create a new home screen, right, that contains the list of tweets. Okay. All right. So up to this point is a read only. You're just reading the tweets and just rendering it in a new screen. Okay, that's easy. Right. And the challenge here for everybody is to create a little text box where you can type the new tweet, like this text box here, right, where you can type in tweets. Or you can add the tweet. So add that, a text area. That looks like this with a tweet button and some some focus font icons down where you can type here what you want. And it might look something like this, right? This what's happening is you can type in the text, right? There's some icons. So here's an example of how you would build this little element here. This goes at the top of the home screen. So at the top of the home screen, you can have the list at the bottom of the tweets, and then you're going to have the what's happening input field at the top. Okay, so use the what's happening, create a reducer, that allows you to create a new tweet, and so it creates a new tweet that adds the tweet at the top of the array. So push adds the tweet at the bottom, and on shift puts it at the top. Okay, so you can append or prepend, right? Put it at the top, right? And then render and use the dispatch to send the new tweet and create a new tweet. This is almost identical to what we did today in class, right? So you could absolutely use today's lecture, right, to complete this portion of the assignment. By deleting tweets, you already know how to do that. We did this in class, right? You get dispatch, you have to delete the tweet, and you pass in the ID of the tweet. I did it here with the ID of the tweet, but you could, here in the assignment, ask you to use the ID. You can use the tweet if you prefer. It doesn't have to be the ID. Here in class, we pass in the entire tweet object, but the ID would work the same. Right? So here's an example of the tweets reducer. Right, in challenge, so that's the assignment, right? And then the challenge asks you to create a profile component, right? That if you navigate to the profile component, allows you to edit your name, show some data. I removed my date of birth here, and so this is the reducer should take in this as the user. So this is very much what we had started working on the current user, right? We have a reducer with an initial user here. So this is somewhat that, but a little more involved with pictures and whatnot. So if you click on edit, right, it navigates to a different component. So this is the profile component. When you click on edit, it navigates to the edit profile component. Okay, which displays a form where you can type in the name, right, the bio, the location, the date of birth. You're not required to upload images, right, to change your avatar handle or your heading. If you want to play around with that, sure, knock yourself out, but it's not required. End file the deliverables. Okay. Anyway, I am a little bit over time. Does that make sense? I'm gonna fix up my update, and then I'm going to push this so you can, feel free to use the code. I think it should give you a leg up on getting started with the assignment, right? Or feel free to ignore the code that I share with you, but hopefully it'll be useful. Okay. All right. Any questions? All right, everyone. Thank you. Good night.